Now I want to do a digression here. I want to tell you a story because I'm convinced that in a group this size there are people who will find some comfort and help from this story. Something that happened to me a long time ago when my son was a teenager, just starting into young manhood, way back at the time of the hippie craze in this country. He was always in trouble at school, never did like school from the first day he went there. He wouldn't pay any attention to the teachers, always sat and stared out the window, and drifted to the bottom of the class and made friends with the roughest kids in the class. He didn't like school. He got into trouble. There's always being the phone. My poor wife, the phone was always ringing. It was the school said, "Would you come down to the school? We're having trouble with your son." One time they sent him home because he was drunk. Preacher's son. And ran away once, didn't get very far, but rebellious, disrespectful. Finally, the day came when I got a hold of a suitcase. I plunked the suitcase down in the hall and said, "There you are, John." I said, "There's a suitcase there. Go and put your stuff in it. And then make up your mind whether or not you're going to stay or leave. There's your suitcase. You can go if you want to. But if you stay here, you'll do what we say. We're not putting up with this kind of business any longer. If you make up your mind whether you want to stay here and be obedient to your parents or whether you want to be disobedient, do your thing, pick up your bag and go." After thinking it over for a while, "I'll stay." Real enthusiastic, you know. About this time, the Lord led us to somebody who became a great help to us. They also had been in trouble with their teenager, and they'd found a place way out near Fargo, North Dakota, a place called Zion Harbor. It was a place where they'd retired from the mainstream of American life, and they were living communally. And they agreed to take our son in. That meant he had to be adopted temporarily into a family in the compound. And the teacher, the high school principal, became his sponsor. And he lived with him for a while, but he was still a rebel. He didn't want to be there. He liked the outdoor life, but he didn't want to submit to discipline, and he ran away from there twice. Finally they phoned us up, said, "We're sending him back home, can't do a thing with him. Send us a check for his airfare." So we sat down, and I sent him a check, sent them a check so they could buy his ticket, and they bought his ticket. I had to change planes in Chicago on his way to Atlanta. Well, we went down to meet the plane, and when we got to the Atlanta airport, his bags came off, but he didn't. He'd hopped the plane in Chicago. He was so foolish he didn't realize that his bags made the trip on home. You imagine how we felt. We went down at the airport, here comes his bag and no son. Skipped the plane somewhere in Chicago. Well, I had some idea where he might have gone because there were a couple of boys from the Chicago area in this same Zion Harbor community. And I called up this particular lady where I thought he may have gone. She said, "Yes, he's here." She said, "You better come very quickly because he and two other boys are planning something." So I said, "Try and keep him distracted. We'll be up there as fast as I can get up there." Jumped in the car, got our friends to pray that God would do something about this boy. Off we went to Chicago, and as I drove into the suburb where he was, and came onto the street where he's staying, I saw him, and he'd seen us coming, and he was climbing out the window of the house and preparing to take off. Well, I intercepted him and put him in the car, talked to him for a bit, and he told me he was running away, wasn't coming home. There was a boy named Steve, a year older than he was. Johnny was 15, Steve was 16. They were going to go to Indianapolis, and Steve lived there, and Steve was going to find him a job and going to find him a place to live, and they were going to live it up. So I didn't know what to do. I said, how are you going to get to Indianapolis? He said, going to hitchhike. I said, well, why don't you hitchhike a ride with me? I got to go right through Indianapolis on my way to Atlanta. Why don't you hitchhike a ride that far with me? He said, I'm not coming home. I said, well, we'll see about that, but in the meantime, hitch a ride as far as Indianapolis. So he did. He and this fellow Steve, they sat in the back seat car whispering things to each other, and we started driving home. When we got to Indianapolis, they all unloaded, and I went to see the boy Steve's father. There was a pit stop along the way where we stopped to get some hamburgers and thing, and Johnny went off to the bathroom, and this boy Steve was hanging around, and I said to him, hey, son, I said, tell me, how'd you like being responsible for a 15-year-old boy? Real intelligent. I said, don't give me that stuff. I said, my boy's not listening to me, he's listening to you. What are you going to do with him when he gets sick? You're more brilliant. I said, what's your father going to say when you show up with your new responsibility? Well, we arrived at this kid's house. Nobody was home, so they unloaded the car and went in the house, and we drove off down the highway a couple of miles and got a motel. After supper, I called up the house, and the boy's father, Steve's father, answered the phone, and he said, what do you mean by leaving your boy here? Oh, I said, I didn't do that. Your son did that. I said, my boy is not listening to me. He's listening to your son. He says he can get work for him and a place for him to live. He said, I know that place. He said, I wouldn't put a dog in there. And he says, as for work, there's no work around here or anywhere else. He said, you come and get him. I said, I plan to. But I said, I tell you what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to give him a piece of your mind first before I come. And I'd like you to tell him the facts of life about things around where you are. He's listening to your boy. He said, oh, I'll do that. So I gave the man time enough to give my son a going over, and then I called up and asked for him. He was as mad as a hornet. He says, I'm not coming home. I said, yes, you are. He said, no, I'm not. I said, I'll be there at 9 o'clock. He says, I won't be here. He said, I'm taking off. I said, well, I've had about enough of this. I said, you are my responsibility. You're my son. You're still underage. I'm coming for you. Better be there. If you're not there, I'll send the police to get you. I'm not coming. Don't bother coming. So we spent the night, as you may well expect, calling on God. Went round there next morning, and he was still there, packed his bags, sitting there, looking like murder. We loaded the car, put his stuff in the car. He finally got in the back seat, locked the door on him, climbed in, took off. I tell you, it was like sitting in one of the suburbs of hell. There was a feeling of rage, of defiance, of hate, of animosity, rebellion in that car. And we drove off down the highway heading for Atlanta. He was sitting in the back seat. Every time I looked in the rearview mirror, he was glowering, muttering to himself. He says, "First time I get a chance, I'm running away." I said, "You do that, we'll send the police out." And this is the turning point in the whole story. This boy now is city magistrate. He's bringing up his boys for God. But he just sat there, glowered. And after a while, God put something in my heart. I said to my wife, let's quote Bible verses. Let's go through the alphabet, quoting Bible verses. And so we did. We started, all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If any man hear my voice and open the door, I will come into him and will sup with him and he with me. Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden. Well, would you believe we got about halfway through the alphabet, and all of a sudden I looked in the rearview mirror and something had happened. Some evil spirit had left that car. There was a different atmosphere in the car. That boy was sitting up in the car and he had a smile on his face, and his first intelligent word since I'd seen him days before was, "When do we eat?" We stopped and ate, and I said to him, "Would you like to drive?" "Would I like to drive?" "Oh, yes." Well, I wanted him captive audience right up next to me. So he took the steering wheel. We headed home, towards home, and he's different. He's far from where he needs to be yet, but he's turned a corner. He doesn't know it, but he has. And by, I said to him, "Now, let's talk about what happens when we get home." I said, "You don't have to go to school if you don't want to. I think you're very foolish not to go to school. But I'm not going to make you go to school. But I am going to make you work. You are not going to lie around the house. You either go to school or you go to work. If you don't have work, you go out and find it. And you keep looking till you get it. Will you agree to that?" He said, "All right. As long as I don't have to go to school." Hated school. I said, "Now, I can't stop you smoking. If you want to smoke, that's your business." I said, "I think you're very foolish to smoke. And I certainly don't smoke, and you're not going to smoke in my house. But you can smoke outside. That's your business. I won't try to stop you smoking. But you smoke outside. You don't smoke up my house." And he said, "I don't like the kind of music you play. But what I'll do, I'll buy you some earphones. And you can listen to all that kind of music you want. You can have it as loud as you like, as long as I don't have to listen to it. You can play that music into your head until you go crazy if you want. But I'm not going to listen to it." Well, one other stipulation was that you go to church. I say, "You're going to go to church once on Sunday. You don't have to go to my church, but you have to go to church. It has to be a church I approve of. Just one service on Sunday." Well, he agreed to these stipulations. They seemed free from any particular barbs, and we got in, settled down, and first day after Sunday, when we got down to business, he went out looking for a job. Well, of course, he couldn't find work. There wasn't any work around. I got some of my friends scouting around for me, and finally I said to him, "Somebody told me that they're hiring down at the Coca-Cola plant. Would you be interested in going to see about a job there?" He said, "Oh, yeah." So he showed up in his hippie attire, you know. He had hair halfway down his back, and he had what he thought was a beard. It was a bunch of fuzz all over his face. And he had all this hip stuff that was made him feel like a hero. And I said, now, you're going for an interview for a job. Would you take some advice? He said, what? I said, go and dress like a human being. I said, what you got on's okay for when you're with your crowd, but you want a job, and they're not going to hire you looking like that. Would you listen to your father? He says, I'll be all right. And when we got down to the Coca-Cola place, before he left the car, I said, would you like some advice as to what to say and how to deport yourself in there? Oh, he says, I'll be all right, I'll be all right. Well, he came out half an hour later looking very pleased with himself. I said, what happened? Did you get the job? Oh, yes, he said, I think I got the job. I said, what makes you think that? Oh, he said, he's going to call me. I said, welcome to the real world. He is not going to call you. You did not get the job. And I'll tell you why you didn't get the job. Because you went in there dressed like that and you wouldn't listen to my advice. But you didn't get it. Oh, I did. No, you didn't. He didn't. At one point in my life, for a whole year, I was between ministries, and I worked for a friend of mine in Atlanta who had a big trucking company. And I called up the guy who did the hiring. He was a tough individual. Ever saw a hard, tough individual was this fellow. And he'd been saved late in life and was a good friend to me. And I called him up. I told him about my son. I said, I want to bring him in, and I want you to give him a job interview, but I don't want you to give him a job. I want you to bore the daylights out of him. I said, I'd do it. So I said to him, I said, son, I think I can get you an interview with Claude Brown's trucking company. Oh, he said, good. I said, as a matter of fact, it's this afternoon. Can you be ready at 3 o'clock? Yeah. So I dropped him off at the office where this guy had his desk, and just off the dock there, and he came out an hour later as white as a sheet. That guy had cussed him up and down and told him what he thought of him, and if he was his son, what he wouldn't do to him. And as for hiring him, he'd rather hire somebody off the street than somebody looking like that. He came out, I said, did you get the job? He said, no. What happened? He bawled me out. Oh, I said, that's sad. I got a hold of another friend of mine. This fella bought old houses, dirty old houses, and fixed them up. I said, will you give my son a job? It was the middle of summer. I said, will you give him a job scraping paint off the attic someplace where it's nice and... Pay him the minimum wage, deduct everything you can think of, income tax. I said, I think I got you a job with Henry. He came back all smiles. Yeah, I got the job, Dad, got the job. Going to start tomorrow. I said, how are you going to get there? Huh? I said, how are you going to get there? Oh, I drive Mom's car. Oh, I said, oh, no, you won't. That's not your car, that's her car. You got to ask her if you can drive her car. That's not your car. You can't afford a car. And besides, even if she gives you the use of her car, you're going to have to put the gas in it. And you're going to be responsible. You're going to have to get insurance on that. And that's going to cost me about $1,000. That's going to come out of your paycheck. And if you're once a man, a working man, now you're growing up. You're a man, you're responsible for yourself, and you've got a job, well, you can buy your own clothes. I'll let you sleep in our house, all right? I mean, you can go and sleep in here. You can eat here for a while, too. But you're a man now. You've got a job. You've got to accept your responsibilities. Well, he started and came home not too enthusiastic. He'd given him a dirty job, a sweaty job, in the middle of an Atlanta summer, and scraping paint off something or other. He came home night after night, sweating, tired, worn out. Got his paycheck. He could hardly believe what he got for his paycheck. What's all this? Well, I said, well, now you're a man. You got to accept manly responsibility. That's your paycheck. That's what they call your gross pay. But you see, they take off your income tax, they take off your Social Security, and they take off medical insurance, and I don't know what that one's for, but anyway, they take that all too. And he was getting more for pocket money when he was half decent, behaving individual than he was getting now with a paycheck. Well, one of his favorite tricks during this period was to torment his mother by little gimmicks and tricks he devised and make his mother cry. Well, the Lord finally got a hold of her in all this and said to her, why are you so depressed? What have I ever done to you except love you? Have I changed? Have I gone away? Why can't you be happy with me? Let me take care of this. Because the very beginning of all this process, the Lord said to us as we were looking at a dead boy, you see. That's the whole point, isn't it? The boy was dead in trespasses and sins. And he made a profession once when he was little to be saved, but you can't go by that. Well, I shouldn't say that quite, but very often that has to be totally reconfirmed in youth. But God said to us, give me thy son. Get out of the way. Stop interfering. You've done everything that a parent can do. And now you hand him over to me. And the Lord led us down through this process. And what he used to do, he used to play these games on my wife. And she would be depressed and unhappy. And the Lord dealt with her about that. And she said, yes, Lord, you're absolutely right. And when he came home from work from then on, instead of finding he could upset his mother, he discovered that she was singing hymns. And she was playing hymns on the piano. And whenever he started his stuff, she just sang and talked to him nicely. And won a great victory in her own experience. And then one day he came home from work. He'd been doing this for about 3 or 4 weeks now. And he came home and he was tired. He was sweaty. He was discouraged. He got his next paycheck and it was just about as bad as the last one. And his car insurance was coming up. And all of a sudden he said to his mother, he said, Mom, I blew it. I blew it. I should never have left Zion Harbor. Never. Do you think Dad would let me go back? She said, you'd have to ask him. When I came in, he asked me, could he go back to Zion Harbor? Oh, I said, that's not up to me. That's up to them. I said, they took you in. They were kind to you. They gave you a home. The high school principal became your substitute parent and was very good to you. And you treated them by running away and being disobedient and causing them grief. I said, not up to me whether you go back, it's up to them. There's the telephone, go and call them, ask them if they'll take you back. Tell them that you want to come back, that you're sorry, and that you'll take any punishment they want to give you if they'll let you come back. If you want to go back, there's the phone. That's what to say. So he went in the bedroom. He came back about 10 or 15 minutes later, looking very unhappy. I said, what happened? He said, they don't know whether they want me back or not. They said they'd call me. Well, they did. They did. And he went back. And within 2 weeks, he was saved. And he began to excel at school. They phoned me up. They phoned me up about 6 months later. Said, we're sending your son back home. I said, now what's happened? And they said, nothing's happened. We're sending him home. He's an absolutely transformed boy. He said, we're enjoying him so much, we want you to have him back so you can enjoy him too before he graduates from high school. He came home. He went back to his high school. He graduated from high school, but he took the leading part in the school play. He went back to all the kids he ran with and testified to them about Christ. That woman had a dead boy on her hands. She had done everything that a mother's love could think of for her boy, but he was beyond the reach of even a mother's love. There are people here probably this morning, and you've got dead boys and dead girls. God is still saying, give me thy son. And then get out of the way. And don't interfere with what I do. Give me thy son.